Previously on the Seventh Valkyrie, Krona reveals his secret weapon, the reality-rending force known only as Knightmare. But behind the black tattoos and the devastating power lies a familiar face and a complicated past. Let's dig in next on the Seventh Valkyrie. Chapter 30. Into the Flickering Dark. The 21st day of winter, just past midnight. BC. The black-haired woman who had once been called Blair Atoll Sethura, and Slave Girl, and Knightmare, and most recently BC, stood on the broken barge. Her vision flickered back in from oblivion as Krona's men leapt up beside her, opening fire with their gifts towards any Eterans who had dodged her stroke of midnight, or still floated thrashing and dying in the water. BC remained unmoving, far more occupied with the nauseating process of returning to reality from oblivion. A rush of half-real memories raced around in her head, among the screams and the flashing lights. She was younger, dancing with her father and her friends. She was older, making the first kill she'd been awake for. Then she was somewhere in between, being grabbed and taken and used, stabbed half to death, and then she was back with her family, sitting on a cold winter's day in Mandus, snuggled up by the fire, eating shortbread and berries and syrup and praying that every day could be like this. With a gasp, BC finally severed her connection to the void, stumbling back as reality came surging back in. The torches quelled by her power burst back to life, and the straining gifted on the barge went to light, their power suddenly unchained. Sounds and sensations returned, the cries of war flooding in from all directions, the drum and horns calling out as battle lines collided across the bay, and the crash of Eteran battlecraft and Freelander wave runners surging together in the churning waves. Despite the stroke of midnight, Yosin's red flare had gone out, and the battle had begun. At the center of it all was Krona, the Machine King, still watching both directions with one human eye and one mechanical, his head cradled in his hands, unbothered as four family reinforcements streamed onto the barge. To BC's left, Krona's men and women finished their barrage on what remained of the Eteran command, now mostly bloody water and sinking pieces of barge, and abruptly fell back around Krona into a defensive formation, holding firm as four family soldiers continued filing onto the barges from their flagships. But with their eyes locked on each other, Machine King soldiers and four family warriors, it was actually BC who struck next. Seeing what the others hadn't, she stepped again to the edge of the barge and reached out to the void. Gifts flickered behind her, and then black scars ripped out across reality, away from the two battle lines towards Eteran battlecraft, a pair of them, which had been charging at full stroke towards the barge. Boat and bodies alike slid apart like well-sliced cheese under BC's stroke of power, and in seconds the collapsing vessels crashed into the ocean, sending the remaining soldiers swimming for their lives or drowning under the weight of their armor, weapons, and comrades. Suddenly, BC too was swimming, but in the cool lake waters of the distant past, trying to keep up with a mother whose rarely given smile made all the difference. And then, in an instant, she was crawling across the desert earth, flesh searing and tattered from days of unrelenting sun, as she begged to have just a little more water, a moment of shade in the tent. And then BC was standing uneasily back in the present once more, one knee on the barge, feeling the swell of the rocking waters where the Mandarian met the sea. Chaos reigned out on the bay, the remaining Eteran vessels unsure whether to organize and fight or try to flee as the Freelander forces swept across the water. Fuck. BC held her stomach and one temple as she tried to steady her spinning guts and memories. But what brought her clarity was the cold steel hand of the Machine King on her shoulder, and a gentle voice in her ear. "Blair, are you all right? That was quite a display." Gritting her teeth, BC fought the shifting waves and stood up through 3 separate, flashing decades to get to her feet. Taking a deep breath, she slapped Krona's hand off of her, meeting his one organic eye. The other still flitted back and forth, scanning the waves and the barge around them. "Look at me. Both fucking eyes, Krona." For a brief moment, his mechanical eyes switched and locked on hers. "You do not touch me, you do not call me by my name, and you do not pretend you fucking care about me. We have a common enemy tonight. Tonight, do not fucking push it." He said nothing, only holding her gaze a moment longer before he blinked. Then his mechanical eye flickered again and started scanning, and he stepped past her towards the edge of the barge. With Krona, sometimes that was all you got. Behind him, the Machine King's men held their loose defensive line, swaying in their shifting cloaks on the rocking barge. Against the backdrop of the flashing lights of battle, what they lacked in numbers, they made up for in their raw, unreadable power. 4 ranks of family soldiers were alight in all their strength, and yet all eyes remained on the figure of the Machine King, surveying the devastation across the bay with an impassive stare. Then, in a smooth, unhurried movement, he reached into his cloak, drawing a flare gun of his own, and firing a streaking, screaming shot out across the bay, turning midnight nearly to day with a shining violet trail. And as the screaming flare crested and slowly began to fall back towards the ocean, violence surged all across the Edarin battlecrafts. Entire legions of Mandarians turned on their fellow soldiers, and in a moment, the Edarin formation had descended even further into chaos. Craft turned upon craft, man upon man, steel upon steel, all while the Freelanders swarmed the new city side of the bay, collapsing the outer line and wreaking havoc with their wave runners deep into the Edarin fleet. The 4 family warriors remained at the ready as the flare fell back across the sky, lighting the rapidly evolving battlefield. With 3 strokes of midnight and a violet flare, a night of mutually assured massacre had turned into an old city slaughter, and the speakers had gathered to confer in hushed voices. Silhouetted by the flare still burning back towards the water, the Machine King turned to the assembled crowd, his mechanical eye growing red as his metal arms shone in the falling flare light. But as he strode past BC, she reached out and hooked his belt, pulling him close. Then she traced along his waist and snatched a second flare gun from a holster, unused and trimmed in red. I fucking knew it. Out on the water, the Edarin turncoat vessels raised high the flag of the infinite gears. How many men did you have ready to go the other way, to turn on the old city? You seriously think that I wouldn't bring a backup flare, Blair? She raised the flare gun high, in no mood for his rhymes and button-pushing and word games. What happens if I shoot this? He stepped towards her. A lot of people get very confused, and more people probably die than need to tonight. You would have sent your men to slaughter the old city, even though you knew I would have fought to stop you. I don't claim to know the future, Blair. Things could have gone differently, but they didn't. What else do you want from me? What would it have taken to change your mind? Was it just that old fuck pissing you off that decided who died tonight? The Machine King smiled, his bright white teeth shining. Then, he flicked his hand, and suddenly, between his fingers, there was a dancing gold coin. Well, Blair, he said, continuing to ignore her demands, You and I both know how invigorating I find it, that life can change so drastically all according to chance. A simple roll of the dice, a toss of the coin. There was a whir and a hiss and the sound of metal grinding against metal, and then there was a pure, clean ping as Krona fired the coin up into the air, spinning and whistling as it glittered into the distance. BC watched it go, squinting as it vanished into the dark, and then the Machine King was next to her again, voice low, almost sultry in her ear. Come on, B. You know me. You think I didn't have a plan in case the family said no? He leaned in with an almost forgotten intimacy. Can you imagine any world where I didn't have a cascading multiplicity of plans for every decision, every eventuality that tonight might bring? She looked up at him, and he looked right back, staring into her eyes. How many of those plans involved the old city burning? How many of them left all of your friends to be murdered by the Eterans? Ask yourself, Blair, just how many of those bad possibilities are tied to you firing off that flare? Do you really want to make the odds of your friends surviving any worse? BC looked down at his still open palm, waiting for her to just give him the flare. Whatever his plans, disrupting them now could mean that lots more people would get hurt, or it could save hundreds of lives. Fuck! It was impossible to tell. The faint whistle returned, and without taking his eyes from BC, Krona's arm flicked to the side, catching the plummeting coin from the air with a quickly silenced. Then he held it up between the two of them, spinning it on his finger, perfectly centered between his violet and metallic eyes. Refusing to be the one who blinked first, Blair watched the coin spin, and she had been around enough dealers, gamblers, and thieves to spot it as cheaters change. Both sides of Krona's coin were heads. I'll give you the answer, my love. How many of my plans leave you and everyone you've ever loved dead? Tonight, none. When it comes to the most important things in life, I make sure the odds are always in my favor. He palmed the coin and she rubbed her temples, tossing the flare to him in disgust and turning away. I don't even know what you're trying to get me to believe anymore, Krona. She turned to face the lines of 4 family soldiers. You know you always confuse me with your vague bullshit. Past them, Machine King and family warriors still stood in a stalemate, tensions rising even as word went out across the bay to press the Freelander advantage. Oh, don't be like that, Blair. Would you believe me if I said I did this all for you? To make a world where you and your friends could live peacefully, where the Freelanders would be truly free, and the iron rule of Edera would be thrown off at last? I wouldn't believe that for a fucking second. Well, then I guess you'll figure out my grand scheme in time. He began to walk away, towards the center of the barge, but BC hooked his jacket one more time. There is no eventually, Krona. We had a deal. I help you turn the tide tonight, and you leave us all the fuck alone after that. That was the deal, you're right. But I also did offer you the chance to join me again, and I don't know, maybe as the night goes on, you'll reconsider. And how exactly do you figure that? It takes a strong mind to look a Knightmare in the face and see something beautiful, Blair. He gestured out to the soldiers and the families beyond them. In the knife's-edge tension surrounding their arrival on the barge, BC hadn't had time to notice the faces of the four family soldiers. To a man, they were people who BC had drunk with, celebrated with, scrapped with, carried home, trained against, tended to. But now, they looked at BC with the same gaze they had for Krona. Cautious uncertainty, defiance, and fear. People in the old city were already nervous about you, and now they know of your power. How long do you think it'll be before someone tries to take you out? I give it until first light tomorrow. No, I think at the very least, a couple of people are gonna make a play for you tonight in the heat of battle. He began to stride towards the four families, but as BC grabbed his shoulder this time, the torches on the barges flickered. Her eyes were ringed in black, and if the sound had not been halved due to her power, BC would have heard the men murmuring as their gifts faltered ever so slightly. You tricked me, Krona. You fucking knew this was gonna happen. You tricked me, you fucking liar. He turned over his shoulder, shoving her off of him, and for a moment his violet eye grew cold. He did not deign her worth the attention of both of his eyes, not this time. Take some responsibility for your own actions, Blair. The strings of a puppet don't suit you. I will fucking kill you. I'll fucking kill them all too, every last one of your soldiers. You know I can. You are welcome to try. Just kill the Edrins first, love, and our deal still stands. Hey there. If you're hearing this, it means you're listening to the public version of this episode. I appreciate you taking the time and your interest in the series. It really helps the algorithm, it helps us grow. But if you are enjoying the show, maybe take a look over at our Patreon. We have uncut versions of the early episodes, access to new chapters before they're released for the general public, and you can shape the future of the series by deciding on new merch drops, bonus content, and more. You can get started for free at patreon.com/Seventh Valkyrie. That's patreon.com/7THVALKYRIE. Hope to see you there.